Welcome, everyone, to the non-spoiler review of Goblin Quest by Jim C. Hines. I'm Leanne, and if you're new to my channel, hold a seat, sit down. We're going to talk about this book. If you've been here before, you know the drill. We're going to get back into this, okay? So, this story is part of a series called Jig the Goblin. I like Jig. He's unique. What made me read this book? A friend's mother gave it to me, and it sounded interesting to me. So, here's a blurb. Jig the Goblin was the rentiest member of an admittedly puny race. Jig was scrawny, so nearsighted as to almost. Jig the Goblin was the rentiest member of an admittedly puny race. Jig was scrawny, so nearsighted as to be almost blind, and had such a poor self-image that when he chose a god to worship, it was one of the forgotten ones. After all, what other sort of god would have him as a worshipper? They spelled that wrong. It should be worshipper, not worship. Worshipper. Whatever. He also had a cowardly fire spider for a pet, a creature that was likely to set your hair on fire if it got into a panic. Made to stay in tunnel and watched by the goblin bullies who'd been assigned the job. It was just Jig's luck to be taken captive by a group of adventurers with the usual complement of a dwarf warrior, a prince had to prove himself, his mad wizard brother, and an elven thief. Forced to guide this ill-fated party on their search for the rod of creation, though Jig had no more idea how to find it than they did, he soon had them stumbling into every pearl anyone had ever faced in the fantasy realms, and they hadn't even found the necromancer or the dragon yet. This genre is considered young adult high fantasy. Did this live up to my expectations? It was good. It's a different type of storytelling than what is normal for books, because there's a lot of books where you have adventures and you go on, or technically, I've never read a book quite like this, because you don't really read books where people go on adventures into dungeons and stuff before. Nowadays there's plenty of that stuff, like the solo and web novels, the beginning after the end. There's probably others, but they're all started out as web novels or manhwas, and then they become more. So this is actually a twist on even that. So you have your adventures, and yes, of course, you mash up people, and they go into a cave to do some exploring and to defeat the dungeon boss, technically. But what makes it different is that it's told in the perspective of Jig, one of the dungeon monsters. Goblin, who has to deal with hobgoblins and other dangerous things, but doesn't go very far and is the weakest one out of all of the monsters inside the mountain cave. I like that twist. It's something you don't see very often. I mean, I have been reading The Time I Already Encountered Slime by Fuse, which does have a slime as the main character, and a lot of monsters, underdogs, coming up and at it. This I had read a long time ago, so all three books I've read before. And until Fuse came out with That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, there wasn't that many novels based like this, where it's more monsters than adventurers that get told in the storyline. So the unique perspective that it had back when it was first published, and this book is old. It was first published in 2005. So none of that stuff existed back then. None of this popular stuff in the manga and book world existed back then in 2005. That's anything like this at all. I don't know if this is that old. I've only read it twice, but then again, this is secondhand. Somebody else gave it to me. So that's about all I can tell you, really, without spoiling it. So if you want to move on to the non-spoiler section, we'll get to that in just a minute. If not, you can leave after this last thing. So, should you go and read the story/series? Yes. If you like or want to read a twist on the adventures of humans by seeing through the eyes of one of the monsters they like to wander and kill, and feel like they have to, because how else are they going to get past them in the dungeons? Because obviously goblins are going to attack anything that comes after them, and so you must defend yourself because you're an adventurer. But this time it's Jig, who's like, I just want to stay in my home, in my cave, with my people, and not leave it, because I'm not powerful. I'm a coward. I'm a coward that's not strong, and I can't do anything. So it's an interesting read. It really is. So now, if you want to leave me a comment, a subscription, or even your lovely like, I said that all out of I said that so out of order. Drop it down below, would you please? It truly helps out the channel. It helps me out. And the fact that I get to see that you guys like this stuff and want to see more of it. Now, if you don't want to be spoiled on what this is, because I'm about to spoil it to you by talking about all the characters and everything, and the book in relation to that, please exit the video, go read the book, then come back. Yeah? Okay, let's do that. So there's not a lot of named characters in this, which is good for me, because a lot of books that I have read that have like 30 people in it, and like only 5 of them are really important or something. And you're just going like, why so many people? Because that's just the way it is. So you begin with Jig, the goblin, who is definitely nearsighted, and he does have a cowardly fire spider named Smudge, who gets stepped on and then resurrected. So Jig gets bullied by Porak, which is a tougher, stronger goblin than he is, to the point where him and his other friends bully Jig into becoming part of a patrol, where he meets the adventurers, and accidentally leads to Porak and his patrol being slaughtered. Because he was hoping they would slaughter the adventurers, but of course the adventurers slaughtered him instead. So, yeah. Porak accidentally need to be slaughtered. And that's when you meet the adventurers. All but one of them are okay. The rest suck. Okay? Alright, we'll get on to that. So you have Darnok, Stone Splitter. He's a dwarf, a tutor, a choreograph? Somebody who does maps. Mapograph? Whatever. He maps out everything. Like, he's obsessed with mapping. But he also prays to his own god, which is Salus Earthmaker, who can heal and give strength to him in his times of need. Which he does use several times throughout this on not only Jig, because Jig's unfortunately involved in the whole adventure after being captured by the adventurers after leading Porak to his slaughter, but on several other party members too. And he likes to drink the same exact stuff that Jig likes to drink, and they call it dwarven specialty wine, but it's something that his cook Golaka can make with what's found in the mountains, which is basically the same thing the dwarves have in their mountains. But Darnok has been a friend of the king and queen of a specific kingdom for a very long time, and had been tutors to several of the brothers, princes. And 2 of the princes are involved in this. The first one is Barius Wendelson. He is on a quest to find the Rod of Creation so he can show off to his family that, look at my adventure. Aren't you proud of me? Give me praise. Jealousy. Jealous sure do be doing weird things. So, He's the leader of the party and everything. You have Rislin Wesselson. He's a prince, but he's also a mage or a wizard. But he's also sold his soul to a dragon for more power because he's a weak wizard. And so he shares his mind with the dragon, and only Jig can figure that out because Jig's ears are better at hearing than anybody else's, and he can hear two voices speaking instead of just one. And Risland is the one who put the bug in Various' ears to go hunt the Rod of Creation because the dragon who Risland made a contract with, the one that's in his head, Strom, wants freedom from the cave that he's been trapped in. And the only way to free him is through the Rod of Creation, which he's hoping Various would find for them. And then you have Rihanna. She's an elf, 15 years old, young, of course, but also not raised by elves, but raised by humans, so knows more human mannerisms than elf mannerisms, and got kicked out of both because she didn't fit in to any of it, so she became a thief. And she tried picking Various' pocket, got caught, and instead of being thrown in prison and tortured and possibly killed, they forced her to work for them on the adventure with the intentions of imprisoning her afterwards because she can pick locks, and that's what they wanted. And she's the only cool one, even though she turned on Jay because they lied to her. So she got pricked by something that was going to turn her into a zombie for a necromancer that was in it, the necromancer that's in it. And Jig cut off her finger to save her life when Various was just going to, like, unalive her. Because they were like, oh, that's the only way to do it. And Jig's like, well, if it hasn't gone up the arm yet and hasn't gone to the brain yet, then that means she's possibly saved. So Jig, instead of saying anything, just went, boop, boop. And at the same time cut himself. But hey, he saved her. And Various, who wanted to keep Rihanna on his good side, lied and said that, Jig was trying to kill her. And that they were going to come up with a way to heal her, which was the lie, of course. But yeah. And so, the Havrilus Rislin, who uses heavy magic, goes a little cray-cray in the head and faint. Try to track down a necromancer so they can kill it. And it leads them in a big-ass circle where they have to fight a bunch of zombies. And Smudge helps out in that and lighting a few of them on fire by accident. And they find out that they get led back to the same room they were in that trapped them, that almost ended Rihanna's life. And that's when they met the necromancer. Jig figured it out too. He's in the walls. Has to be. It was a puny little fairy that had the wand that he killed the necromancer and became the necromancer. Well, Jig killed it. Various said in his brain, oh, why did it? Not Jig, obviously, because how can a goblin kill a necromancer? You know? How can a goblin kill a necromancer? Not to have been me. Yes, it was me. I did it. Then you meet Strom and his dragon things that he created. And Strom's like, fetch me the rod, free me, and y'all can have your lives and anything in this room, because I don't want it no more after I leave. And he shows them what they can do. So they were like, okay, we'll go fetch this rod. So they go back up to the mountain to fetch it. It turns out that Golaka had the rod the whole time. And that's the reason why she was always able to cook. It was because the fire never went out. Because it's a rod of creation. So obviously it's going to bend the will of whoever wields it. Jig figures it out after going to speak to Golaka about it. About something else to warn the chief about the adventurers. And he sees the rod and goes like, that's it. I need to snatch it. So he grabs it, but Various ends up getting it. And then There's a fight for it. Rasimlin wants it, and well, Strom wants it. So they actually go to bring it back to Strom. And while they're doing that, Jig's like, I'm going to pray to this forgotten god, Tamalos, Shadow Star, and hope something good comes out of it. Jig almost dies. Well, literally dies, and Tamalos takes his soul before he passes on and says, hey, look, this worship thing goes a two-way street. I'll do stuff for you, but you gotta do stuff for me. And Jig's like, okay, what do I gotta do for you? And then comes back, heals himself through Tamalos, Shadow Star's abilities, and helps a dragon weird thing kill Sturm, which in the end breaks Rislin's mind. So they take the rod, Rislin, back up to the surface, and they're like, we're gonna haul all this stuff, all this princely stuff up. So they do that, and then when Rian finds out that she's gonna be thrown away and that Jig's gonna be killed, a battle ensues, and that's when Smudge gets stepped on. And Jig kind of goes crazy. He gets a hold of the rod, turns both of the brothers, the princess, into fish. Where they eventually, fish can't breathe, so they pass away. And Darnak, who's like, I can't go back and say that I watched the princess die to the king and queen. So he goes to attack, and Jig turns him into an ugly bird that flies away. At least he's alive. Rihanna, he shapeshifts it to a being with wings and fierce claws, and makes her powerfuler with the rod. And instead of making himself more powerful, all he does is gives himself some glasses, fashions the rod into a spoon, seals the cave mountain, and then goes back to Glock and says, here's your spoon. Cook me food. So that's the characters, and that's their reasons for existing. And a lot of the stuff that happens in this is either because they ignore Jig's advice, like, hey, don't go that way. It's Hobgoblin territory. Bad things can happen. And instead they go. And then Jig's like, kills something, or does something to participate in the unaliving of the being that's in their way. And they're like, oh yeah, it was us that did it, not you, Jig. You're just a goblin. No goblin can do anything. And he's like, prays to tell Shadow Star, go, why in Helmet Shadow Star does this always happen to me? And then he's like, why in my name aren't you doing something for yourself for once? Get off your butt and do the work. And he's like, okay, what do I need to do? So Jig becomes a hero to the goblins for defeating the adventurers, for sealing off the cave and protecting themselves from more adventurers, because now no more adventurers can come in. And it does continue in the next one, which is called Goblin Hero. So, like I said, my favorite character is Jig, because he's the only good thing in it. I mean, like, he's straightforward, like, yeah, we've been eating well, so we haven't needed to eat our dead companions. Without actually saying it, he's like, we've been eating well, so why would we need to save their bodies? And everything. Darnak's the one I don't like. He knew what Boreas and Rislin was doing to Jig and to Rihanna was bad, was not very good or fair, but he followed along because of his loyalty to the family. And in the end, he attacked Jig just out of that loyalty. And, like, you try to help Jig out throughout the adventures to keep him alive because you knew it was wrong for the way he's being treated, but you just didn't stop it and wouldn't stop it, and felt like you had to defend the brothers through some messed up loyalty thing when they're just terrible human beings. Like, I don't get it. I don't. What stood out as memorable was the book was written from the perspective of a monster and his life. And how he thinks about things compared to adventurers. My favorite passage from the story is Jig turned to face the others. And the necromancer was dead. That left only 24 dead warriors and a possessed wizard. Jig grinned like a madman and waved his sword. Who's next? High on the unaliving he did. He's just like, I will do something about this. My favorite quote. I guess there's a bright side to every flaming corpse. Lights the corpse on fire and it spreads. Killing a bunch of other corpses. Saving lives. It's hilarious. What I thought about the end of the book. Jig can see. He no longer has to squint and be like, I can't see that. What am I looking at? Rihanna is free, so she's free as a bird. She can fly in the sky. Nothing's more powerful than her in the sky. And she no longer has to bow to the wills of humans or elves anymore because she's better than them. Barrios and Rosalind are dead. Bye, you douches. Because I mean, like, you're just evil, ungrateful, and just no good. Darnag is an ugly bird, which I think is justified because, like, Jig didn't want to kill him, but he didn't want to be attacked by him either, so he turned him into an ugly bird to save his life. And I can't wait to see what goes on in book 2 because I've forgotten. It's been a long time since I was like 18 since I've read the books, so we'll see. We'll see what's going on with that. But it was a good ending. I'm glad that Jig is protecting his clan and beating his clan and just, you know, being a goblin. What did it remind you of? That time I got reincarnated as a slime by Fuse, even though Fuse came after. That's what I read first before I reread this, and I'd forgotten what this was all about before I reread it, so yeah, it was a reminder in that sense. This book, as you know, is part of a series called Jig the Goblin. There are 3 books in it. Goblin Hero and Goblin War are next in it, and let's hope we can do some things. And I've just read this, a hilarious good read, one of the funniest dungeon delving epics ever, and it is funny because of Jig. Jig is just one of those characters that you're like, oh my gosh. Poor Jig. I rate this book a 3.75. Only because I think they could have done better with the ending than what they did. It was a little anticlimactic. Jig could have been like, become stronger, become buffer, and defeat him, you know, that way. Instead, he just uses a rod and goes, using this magic jumping through me, and just poof, you a fish, and poof, you a fish, and poof, you're a bird, and poof, you're a winged being that can go around, and then poof, that's sealed up, and oh, Smudge is alive, but he didn't do Smudge. Shasta, Smudge better. I guess it just could be better. So, if you think I deserve a like, comment, or even a lovely subscription, drop it down below. I will see you next illusion.